And we want to continue our conversation right now. Let's bring in our political panel. Julie Harris is the president of the National Federation of Republican Women. Also with us, David Carlucci, former Democratic New York State Senator. To both of you, good morning. I want to continue our conversation on the big, beautiful bill, and then we'll get to what is happening there with this terrorist attack in Washington, D.C. But the bill passing by a vote of 215 to 214 with just two Republicans, Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie and Ohio Congressman Warren Davidson voting against it. All Democrats voted against this bill. This is a significant victory for President Trump and Speaker Johnson. Julie, I want to get your reaction to this passing already and well before Memorial Day.
Yes, it's what the American people voted for. This bill is designed to give lasting legislation and some relief to America. This will help America to thrive for generations to come. We're going to see the take-home pay for the average American go up, tax cuts for the middle class, billions going into the border to build the wall, to add agents, and to increase our technology. The bill has many wonderful components that America needs, America voted for. This is a great victory for President Trump and Speaker Johnson.
And David, we understand from the components of the bill, this bill is going to reduce taxes for 68% of taxpayers. That's the majority. That's a lot of working class people. Tell me about your response to this bill passing.
Well, sure, there's some bright spots in the bill. It still has to get passed through the Senate, remember. But my biggest concern are some of the issues where it's going to be harder for Americans to enroll in health insurance. In fact, experts predict millions of Americans will be dropped from their health care insurance. That's very unfortunate. Cutbacks to SNAP. Those are nutritional health benefits to millions of Americans. It's going to be harder to access that. And in essence, we have economic professors and economists saying that this will add $2.3 trillion to the deficit over the next decade. And that's unfortunate because we've already seen the United States bond rating decrease. And now experts are predicting that that will continue to decrease because of this massive amount added to the deficit. It's just interesting to me that many of these same Republicans that voted for this legislation are ones that have railed against the deficit that we have and saying they would do something about it. But what do? They actually add to that deficit. So I think this is a case where, yes, there are some sugar highs, things like no taxes on tips or overtime, which will be very interesting to see how that actually works. But in long terms, this adds a legacy of debt to our grandchildren. And that's a real problem and something that is unfortunate in this bill. And hopefully the Senate can try to rectify some of this before it actually goes to the president's desk.
Well, like you said, the Senate is going to be taking up some of the details. I want to go back to the issue of health care, David, specifically, because there are a lot of people watching right now, and we want to make sure that people at home are getting actual information, actual facts in terms of what this does, what this looks like, because the president was very clear earlier this week saying that this is not going to touch access to health care. It won't touch Medicare. It won't touch Medicaid. He also said it will not touch Social Security. The thing that it will touch is criminal, illegal aliens who are taking health care benefits away from Americans, according to the president, and it will cut out waste, fraud, and abuse. So where is it that you're saying people are going to lose benefits? Because we don't want people at home to be nervous and afraid if that's not exactly how this is going to work. Because can you give us more details in terms
of
you
have it right on your screen.
Why you're saying that?
Yeah,
well, you're looking
right there. Cut SNAP program by roughly 20%. That's a huge cut when people are just trying to struggle to put food on the table. Those are important services. So that 20% right there on your screen is obvious. Some of the things that might not be so obvious is with the ACA, shortening the enrollment period. Something like that has a catastrophic impact on the working Americans actually trying to take advantage of it. And while you say illegal immigrants, many of the programs have now been tightened to say only U.S. citizens or those that can produce a Social Security number. And that might sound good on the surface, But the reality is we have plenty of people that are here legally that are going through the immigration process that take care of citizens, children, citizens as well, that won't be able to apply for many of these benefits simply because they don't have that Social Security number yet. So these are problematic issues. Yes, you have to dive deep and look at the specifics, but many of these programs that they're trying to cut to provide these tax cuts to many of the wealthiest Americans are on the backs of the working poor. And that's very unfortunate. And that will have a ripple effect in the long term. So it's either we can pay the price now or we're going to pay a price that we can barely afford in the future. And this is one of those bills that actually does that. It just kicks the can down the road, exacerbates many of our problems. And I think it's going to be a legacy of debt to our children and grandchildren.
Julie, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to this because I'm looking at some of the details and we don't want our viewers to get confused when we're talking about a lot of the semantics when it comes to this bill. Can you give us your side of that equation?
The Democrat talking points are meant to put fear in the American people, especially the most vulnerable among us. And the cuts that we're going to see are going to be dealing with the fraud and the waste. And I think most Americans agree that you should be an American citizen to get these benefits. I think the American people can see through the talking points. I always say that time will tell. Many times we've seen these pieces of legislation, especially coming from President Trump, work. They work. The talking points on the front end puts a lot of fear, but let's do the follow-up after they have been implemented.
All right, well, I want to move on to another topic. Thank you both for your reaction to that topic. I want to talk about what else is happening right now. There's an investigation underway. As you know, there was a terrorist attack in Washington, D.C. A man shot 2 people in cold blood. The root of this is anti-Semitism. He was taken away shouting, "Free Palestine, free Palestine." We now understand that there were some congresspeople on the Hill, namely, I believe, so far we know of Ilhan Omar, who would not even comment on this when she was asked about it this morning on Capitol Hill. Julie, the message that you believe every American, every person who values peace needs to take from this incident. We're watching this man who calmly walked up and said, "Yes, I did it." He walked inside the museum after he shot these people allegedly in cold blood on the street. What does everyone watching right now need to take away from what we are seeing play out within our country from people who are supporting terrorism?
The violent rhetoric needs to stop. This is personally heartbreaking to me and to the National Federation of Republican Women. Our organization seeks ways to strengthen the friendship between Israel and the U.S., and that took us to the embassy, and it took us into contact with Sarah. We worked with Sarah. We were currently working on some projects that we felt would help strengthen our ties between our two countries. And so to wake up in the middle of the night to this news, I started receiving text late last night. It was heartbreaking. It took us a little bit to collect our thoughts and to put out a statement. But Sarah and her fiance, they were at an event that focused on bringing humanitarian aid to Gaza. And I thought about how Israel is the only country on this planet that in a time of war will seek to bring humanitarian aid and relief to the children and to the vulnerable of their attackers. That's the kind of country that Israel is. And so these college campuses must put a stop to these violent protests. The rhetoric needs to stop. America needs to stand united against anti-Semitism abroad and at home.
Yeah. David, I'm going to go to you. Not every Democratic congressperson or legislator is chanting pro-Hamas rhetoric, but there are some who in fact are, and there are some who are backing Hamas and what Hamas stands for. What needs to happen? Because there are Israelis and there are Palestinians who both are terrified of Hamas and what Hamas stands for. Hamas has been very open about breaking this country and destroying not just Israel, but America as well. So I want to get your thoughts on what needs to happen within your party to get us to move closer to the issue at hand.
Well, there's many things, and I think it's important to not just put a blanket over the entire party.
Well, like I said, not everyone. Like I said, not everyone in the party is doing it, but there are some who have been doing it and who are very vocal about it, and it's lending to the radicalization of a lot of people in our country.
Well, well, that's extremely unfortunate. And I think what we need to do is look at this in a holistic way, right? We have to get serious about what's happening in Gaza, make sure that we are lending as much aid that we can to Israel. And that's why it was a little unfortunate, where the president was in the Middle East, that he did not visit Israel. It looked like there was a little bit of a tension brought away from the conflict that's going on there. And I think that is a message to some of these countries in the Middle East that maybe it's not as much of a priority that some say it is in the United States. That's unfortunate. But I think more so, right, when we talk about these differences, many from religious points of view, from all different parts of the world. And that's why programs like USAID, right, where we had Elon Musk just say it was a criminal organization, could it be tweaked? Could we make sure that the aid that we're giving around the world is more tightly monitored and controlled, and we're measuring the metrics on what we're doing there? Yes. But to try to end that whole system, I think really does a disservice to our national security here on our soil and around the globe. We need to penetrate these communities at an early stage, make sure that the United States is seen as a friend and not a foe. And that's why, yes, it does take investment. It does take us reaching into our pockets to get there and be proactive and react before there's violence, before there's war, so that we can make sure that we are not trying to infiltrate and spread our ideology, but we're trying to keep peace and spread peace. So we prevent Hamas, Al Qaeda, you name it, from taking over and being the only source of power or a certainty that they have in those regions. And that's the problem. I can't speak to this issue. Obviously, we don't know all the facts yet. It's devastating. It's heartbreaking. But it makes me believe that we need to double down our investments around the world, not just in guns and armor, but in humanitarian aid. We have to find a reasonable way. I'll take Elon Musk's concerns and Donald Trump's concerns, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Julie, I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond to that, because when it comes to, funding and providing money for terrorist organizations, that is not acceptable. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond.
Absolutely. Hamas needs to be completely neutralized. There was peace. They broke that peace on October 7th. Bottom line, the United States of America must stand united against anti-Semitism. We must support our friend and our strongest ally in the Middle East, Israel. This is a time for college campuses to clean up their campuses and to stop these violent protests.
All right. Well, to you both, thank you so much. Dr. Phil just talked about it yesterday. In fact, right here on Dr. Phil's Merit TV, what's happening in this country, the seriousness of it, and now we see this today. You can bet that we're going to stand strong against it, every act of terrorism, and hopefully the country will be able to unite around that as well. Julie Harris, David Carlucci, thank you both for being with us this morning. Appreciate your time.